Welcome back to Spotlight. There's buyer's remorse, and then there's the Browns. Deshaun Watson has played a total of 19 games the last 3 seasons with Cleveland, his highest QBR, 43 in 2023. And of course, Watson going to miss significant time. Browns owner Jimmy Haslam said, quote, during the league meetings about a big swing and a miss the team took. Here it is. We took a big swing and a miss with Deshaun. We thought we had the quarterback. We didn't, and we gave up a lot of draft picks to get him, so we've got to dig ourselves out of that hole. Here is what Cleveland gave up to the Texans in order to get the quarterback they thought would lead this franchise successfully. It didn't work out. 3 1s, a third in 2023, as well as a couple of fourth-round picks. Unbelievable haul there for Cleveland or for Houston that just didn't work out in Cleveland's favor. All right, league meetings are underway, as we said, Palm Beach, Florida. That's where our Jonathan Jones and Pete Prisco are. JJ, let's start with you. This quote was delivered today at the league meetings. What does it say about the Browns admitting to the mistake that the rest of us already kind of knew?
Yeah, and you said it perfectly there, Chris. It is a mistake that we all knew. A lot of people, I should say some people, were saying at the time of the trade and the subsequent contract, 5-year fully guaranteed deal, that was a mistake. And then there was the 11-game suspension. He comes back, he doesn't really look like himself. More people say that was probably a mistake. And then the next year comes around. He plays well, I think it was against the Ravens, and then he gets injured with that shoulder/back injury. More people said it was a mistake. And then this past season, he struggles. He has the Achilles tear, and everyone says it was a mistake. The last person, though, Pete, that I thought would say it was a mistake would be ownership, because Deshaun Watson is still on the team. And so as a journalist, as a reporter, I appreciate when someone tells me the truth. I do not want anyone not telling me the truth. However, it is rare that you hear from an owner about someone who is on their roster saying, yeah, that was a swing and a miss for us, but we're going to keep him and we're going to pay him. I don't know that Deshaun Watson, Pete, is going to play in 2025. I think there are people within that organization who aren't sure either, and would not be surprised if we have seen the last snap of Deshaun Watson in a Cleveland Browns uniform.
You know, when you really look at it, though, he was actually kind of kind, because swing and a miss is one strike, right? This is the equivalent of striking out 50 times in a row. That's what this trade is. It's the worst trade in the history of the National Football League, and it's not close.
Worse than the Herschel Walker trade.
Way worse than the Herschel Walker trade. At least Herschel Walker could do some things. Deshaun Watson never did anything for them. It's a terrible trade. They're still feeling the effects of it. Their quarterback situation is a mess. They're bound by him because of the cap and the money they spent on him, and they don't have those draft picks. Other than that, nice job, Mr. Haslam.
All right, Pete, the Browns do have the 2nd overall pick in this year's draft, and then JJ, I'll ask you for what you're hearing around that pick. But Pete, what would you do with that 2nd overall pick?
I would take the pass rusher from Penn State, Abdul Carter. I just don't think that there's a quarterback that's worthy of being picked number 2 in my book. If Cam Ward were to fall to them, that would be a different story. Then you might consider it. I don't think Shedeur Sanders would be the guy that they would pick in that spot. So I think it has to be Abdul Carter, the pass rusher from Penn State.
I think right now it probably is likely to be. There certainly is going to be some time to evaluate Shedeur Sanders. They're going to be in a position to draft Shedeur. Cam Ward is going to go number 1, and he's going to go number 1 to the Tennessee Titans. And then after that, look, it's going to be 1 of 3 guys when they stick it to. It could be Abdul Carter, and they have to feel comfortable and confident about his foot, the stress reaction that was found in the foot, as well as the shoulders. If it's not him, they're going to have to feel comfortable about Shedeur Sanders leading them into the future. And then, if it's not him, is it Travis Hunter? And then the question is going to be, is he a cornerback or is he a wide receiver, or is he both in some sort of hybrid model?
All right, guys, NFL free agency has been open for 2.5 weeks. We've been talking about where Aaron Rodgers will play next season, if he plays for longer than that. JJ, are his options Pittsburgh or retirement? What are you hearing? You talked with Mike Tomlin about the meeting Pittsburgh had with Rodgers.
That is certainly the 2 options that are on the table for Aaron Rodgers as it stands today. Look, the longer this goes on, the longer that maybe some other potential options open. I mean, my goodness, if this drags into training camp, he could theoretically go to a team that needs a quarterback when a quarterback gets injured inevitably. But right now, it is Steelers or retirement. Everyone that I talk to around the league is heavily, heavily, heavily leaning toward Aaron Rodgers joining the Pittsburgh Steelers. The next obvious question you would have is, okay, well, why hasn't it been done yet? Well, first of all, OTAs haven't started, and so he's not actually missing anything. If you're a coach, would you love to have him in the program? Absolutely. If you're Aaron Rodgers at 41 years old, do you have to be a part of the program right now, especially when you're literally not throwing footballs on the field at a Pittsburgh Steelers facility? No. And so I still anticipate that it will get done. Again, the holdup could be that Aaron Rodgers wants to enjoy a little bit of leverage, right? Hey, Pittsburgh, you really going to go into the season with Mason Rudolph? I asked Mike Tomlin that earlier today. I said, are you comfortable with Mason Rudolph potentially being QB1 when you really have to play some football? He said, that's the reason that we signed him.
Well, he's lying to you, so they're not playing with Mason Rudolph. The question becomes, do they wait and try and figure out what they're going to do in the draft? Could you draft a quarterback and play with the quarterback and not pay Aaron Rodgers? I think Rodgers, I'm with you. Look, he's out throwing with DK Metcalf. He had a throwing session with him. I know that happens all the time, but make a big deal out of that. I think he winds up with the Steelers. He doesn't have a lot of options. What are his other options?
Retirement, which we have been, he has threatened retirement before. There was the whole going to retire and potentially be the host of Jeopardy. He still wants to play. He very clearly wants to play for the Pittsburgh Steelers because he's not going to put himself in a position to go visit a team and go to their facilities and meet with everyone and continue this conversation, right, and communication. Mike Tomlin said that they have continued conversations outside of that meeting that they had at the team facilities. And you'll remember a couple years ago where he was talking about with the Green Bay Packers, the communication they had, and I guess they were trying to call me, but I don't get calls where I am in Malibu. You got to FaceTime me. So I asked Mike Tomlin, I said, hey, when you communicate with Rodgers, what do you do? Do you text, do you call, or FaceTime? He said all of the above.
And I love, JJ, that he said, interesting question. In my experience, anytime somebody starts their answer with, oh, that's a good question, it feels like they're just buying time. But Tomlin ended it with interesting questions. So I think he's legitimately giving you credit there. Pete, one more on this. How patient can Pittsburgh afford to be?
Well, even if you sign Aaron Rodgers, it's really a year or two. It's not going to be much longer than that. He's my age. I mean, he can't play forever. And so you have to look into the draft for a quarterback. At some point in this draft, they have to address the quarterback position. He can talk all he wants about Mason Rudolph. He's not the long-term answer. So Rodgers isn't the long-term answer. So look in the draft. Maybe in the third round, you take a guy like Kyle McCord from Syracuse, a guy I like. At some point in this draft, it might not have to be in the first round, they have to find a young quarterback.
All right, JJ, how much momentum is behind putting an end to the Eagles' not-so-secret weapon? Of course, we're talking about the tush push here, which is back on the table and up for a vote at these league meetings. What are you hearing about the opposition and the number of teams that are going to support the ban?
Okay, so the Green Bay Packers are the only team that put forth a proposal to ban the tush push. And in that proposal, their wording is very specific, where you talk about immediately at the snap, someone shoving the quarterback from behind. So what is immediately to you may be different than what is immediately to me. Is that hesitation? Is that pause? What is a shove, right? I mean, is it a hand in a back? Is it after forward progress is stopped? Is it to begin forward progress? And so I say all of that to say you may have the answer to yourself right now, but it will and can be subjective. And so where things stand right now, as it relates to the tush push, I can report, is that there is momentum to take the play out of the game. A lot of folks that I speak with bring up health and safety concerns. Now, the NFL's own internal data has a 0% injury rate on this play. There's not been a lot of plays on it, right? It's really the Philadelphia Eagles, the Buffalo Bills, and a couple of other teams. So the volume of plays is not really there, but they have a 0% injury rate. That is for ball carrier, that is for the pusher, that is for both sides of the line. But you're talking about the potential risk involved, the potential risk of injury, a very serious injury perhaps. And that has sort of been, I don't necessarily know if it's fair to call it a boogeyman, but that is what a lot of people have talked about. Now, some of the other folks I talk to take a more pessimistic view and they say, yeah, they say health and safety, but the data is at 0%, Pete. What they're really saying is, this is an ugly play. This isn't a football play. I don't like this play. Maybe my team can't stop it, and I want to eradicate this play from the NFL. All those things said, I think what is possible, because they're going to talk about this the rest of the day. They're going to talk about this on Tuesday, and they're going to have a vote on it on Tuesday. I think it is possible that the rule proposal language is tweaked in some way that would allow for 24 of the 32 teams and their representatives to vote to take this play out. So not as it's currently proposed. There's some work, I think, that's still to be done, but I will not at all be surprised if in 24 hours this rule is no more.
Yeah, and I initially was dead set against the tush push. I hate the play. I think it's a terrible play.
You think it's ugly?
But when we talked to Nick Sirianni at the Combine, and he explained to us the process of how they practice it, put it in, work on it, there's been no injuries, and it's something that teams can't stop, and that's why they're mad about it, I'm okay with it now. You outcoach somebody to think the play up and really devise the way to run the play, and now they can't stop it, so now they want to get rid of it. Keep it in. I hate the play, but keep it in.
All right, now to the potential of adding another regular season game. That would bring us to 18, of course, assuming there's no doubt it's going to happen. JJ, how soon could we see it?
It is inevitable. It will happen. The NFL's current collective bargaining agreement runs through the 2030 season. And so we're talking about if you actually want change, because this 18 games is not in the CBA. To get 18 games, you have to have the union to agree to it. And if they don't want to agree to it, you may have to wait until March of 2031 to get it. We're not waiting until then. There's too much money involved. There's too much opportunity involved. And so we will, before the conclusion of this current collective bargaining agreement, see 18 games. Your question of when it will not be in 2025. Formal discussions, I believe, will start to take place. There have been high-level discussions between the NFL and the NFL Players Association. Those will continue. The league also has to map out what the schedule looks like. You add an 18th game. Is it another division game? How many international games were planned? Where do you put the second bye week? How does that interact with a number of things? Broadcast. What networks get what games? All of those things have to be considered. And so, at absolute earliest, we are talking about an agreement that could be enacted by the 2026 season. I still feel that that is too early. And so realistically, in talking with folks here and having covered the NFL for a decade and a half, I could say that realistically, the earliest we could see it would be 18 games beginning in the 2027 season.
Yeah, and I think we know it's coming. I mean, more money for everybody, including the league. But what are they going to give back? Because that's the big question. What do you give back? Because the players aren't just going to agree to this and say, okay, we'll play 18 games. So what are you giving back? Are you getting rid of the preseason entirely? That's a possibility.
Yeah, it's going to be an 18-2 model. So it's 17-3, 3 preseason games. It will now be 18 games and 2 preseason games.
And you'll see more teams working with each other in training camp.
Joint practices.
But what do you do for the offseason? Do you give them more time in the offseason? Do you limit your exposure with the organization while you're at the facility? Because I think we see a lot of pulls and hamstrings and that kind of injury, soft tissue injuries, because these guys don't rest their bodies anymore. So something has to give if you're going to play 18 games.
They certainly will. They'll change some and make some tweaks to the off-season program. Maybe training camps start a little earlier. You get rid of some of the voluntary work that we see in May and June, perhaps. All of those things can happen. And then lastly, revenue split. Right now, NFL players make about 48.8% of all the revenue. They're going to look to get some more of that. They're going to look to get it even closer to 50-50. They're not going to get more than 50%.
Back in my day, they used to work jobs in the off season. They'd show up at training camp smoking cigarettes and getting in shape, and then they'd play their game.
Yeah, your day was terrible.
It was still football. It was still football.
That it was. Leather helmets. All right. Pete and JJ live with us from the NFL League meetings in Palm Beach. Thank you, fellas. All right, here is a look at some of those proposed NFL rule changes. Of course, we've discussed the banning of the tush push. How about the playoff seedings based on records, not division winners? Aligning the postseason overtime rules with the regular season. Yep. And a modification to new kickoff rules, which could increase some more returns. Speaking of rules, are the Yankees breaking, bending, or abiding by them with the new torpedo bats? The Bronx Bombers have been hitting rockets with them through the first 3 games of the season. David Sampson joins us next with his thoughts on that, Rafael Devers' historically slow start, and Max Scherzer on the IL.